And he will be talking how the key economic impact concept of TV advertising could be translated and adapted to the value chain of TV creation. So Joaquín is the product director at the Optiva Media, designing Optiva Media suite of TV content management products. So Joaquín, I leave you the floor and for your presentation. Thanks.
Hello, thank you everybody. So, well, my name is Joaquín López. I work for Optiva Media, and I would like to tell you a tale of two cities in the TV industry. The first domain, or city if you wish, is TV curation. You know, there's an editorial team in charge of promoting content for a particular TV service. We have talked to a number of colleagues doing editorial stuff and content promotion, mainly within paid TV operators. And we came to the conclusion that TV curation is mostly regarded as a black art, not a science. It is dependent on the intuition, the good sense of the editorial team. They are in charge of determining whether placing this particular content entry for promotion, curating this content, is going to be beneficial for some general level KPIs of a TV service, such as engagement or reduction in churn, etc. So we saw that there are limited tools for supporting decision making in TV curation, and what few tools there are more connected to tracking the effectiveness of curation in terms of KPI tracking, engagement, etc., etc. By contrast, we have TV advertising. TV advertising has been with us for 80 years now, and it is extremely well run and understood. And I say that one of the key reasons why TV advertising works so well is that it has a lot of economic underpinnings. It runs on an economic value chain. So it is very easy to understand the roles played by the different agents in this value chain, so that we are progressing from the last 5-10 years or so towards increased automation of TV advertising activities. Most of online advertising now is run automatically by algorithms, and it is critical that there is a common economic understanding on what is going on in order for those algorithms to work properly. So the key insight, the key idea of this short presentation is, what if we distill the basic economic concepts of TV advertising and map those into the world of TV curation so as to come up with a, let's say, formal model of TV curation that helps us better understand the activity and also better automate it or support it via tools and technology. So this is the gist of the idea, and this is what we have been doing in the last few months, and combined with talking to other partners in the industry, so on and so forth. So if we want, this is called inventory, okay, in the terminology of the market. So the advertisers want to place an ad, and the publishers have ads available for insertion of ads, okay? So they negotiate a price for inventory allocation. The allocation of inventory and the valuation of this inventory is determined by some figures, again, very well understood in the TV industry, have to do with the impact, the audience of the inventory. This is usually measured in terms of rating points from Nielsen or target rating points, etc., and a description of the audience that is being hit by the ads. On the other hand, advertisers come with some idea of what overall impact they want to make, a profile for their target audience. So with these two, let's say, contrasting point of views, there's a negotiation, and then a price is fixed for the inventory is allocated, and the advertiser is later to determine the return on investment based on the increased sales or increase in brand awareness, etc., etc. So this is the basic model. We can complicate things further when it comes to online digital advertising by the introduction of intermediate players, brokers, exchanges, stuff like that. They help automate and make the things smoother, but at the end of the day, the model remains the same. It is advertisers trading for inventory with publishers, okay? So this is a very classical supply-demand market where the equilibrium price is determined by the intersection of a supply curve and the demand curve. Nothing new about this. We observed several saturation effects. There's a demand-side saturation effect having to do with the fact that if you impact more and more a particular audience by placing more and more ads, the returns do not grow linearly. They tend to, let's say, top up, okay? This is saturation of the audience. Whereas on the supply side, there's also saturation effect. If, say, a TV channel decides to reserve more and more inventory, more and more ad slots, the perceived quality of a TV channel is going to decrease, and the audience is going to decrease as well, and the rating points for these channels are going to decrease. So there's a saturation also in terms of how much inventory can a publisher reserve for advertising. There's some well-established and well-understood metrics for inventory valuation. If we go to the very traditional linear TV advertising market, we are talking about rating points by Nielsen, but there's also a number of other qualifiers or metrics dependent on the ability to go digital, go online, or also take into account other ways of enjoying the content other than linear for video on demand, catch up, etc. The gist of the bottom line of this is that there are a number of parameters understood by the industry in order to evaluate the inventory, okay? So this is about TV advertising. Now, let's see how we can model, again, from a very abstract, high-level point of view, how we model TV curation. Picture, let's say, a pay TV operator whose audience is classified in sub-audiences or segments based on social demographic parameters like age or whatever, okay? For each segment, we have predefined a number of curation slots. These are has a huge catalog of content, and their job is basically to decide which content entries to put in which curation slots. This, from a formal point of view, this very much resembles TV advertising, okay? And in fact, we can sort of write down a cheat sheet to translate TV advertising terminology into TV curation terminology. In TV advertising, we're talking about ads. Here, we are talking about curated content. The inventory in TV advertising is translated to curation slots, okay? And inventory allocation is basically content promotion. There's also a way to translate valuation metrics from TV advertising, such as target rating points or rating points, etc., to some form of inventory valuation in the world, in the domain of TV curation. We will see something about that, okay? So at the end of the day, we have another economic market, another supply-demand economic market, with the slight difference that in this case, we have decided to formalize it so that supply is fixed. We are considering that the number of and disposition of curation slots within the UX of a service is fixed. So we have this vertical line representing the supply side of this market. We have also saturation effect. We have demand saturation effects, because if I am curating a particular content entry, it does not make for a particular segment, for a particular sub-audience. It does not make sense to curate it once more. Once is enough. So we have saturation effects, much like in the case of TV advertising. Here, the saturation is like a hard hit. But the idea is that we have similar effects, and the things we understand from TV advertising can be translated conceptually to effects we observe in the world of TV curation. Inventory evaluation is the critical part of this model, and I won't enter into the nitty-gritty details of this formula. We don't have time for that. There's an associated paper. If you're interested in the formulas, etc., you can read it or contact us back in order to have a conversation. But we do evaluation of the inventory by assessing the value of placing a content entry into a curation slot, which is related to the volume of a segment with the contribution margin of incremental playbacks obtained by the content being curated, and also is related to some figures that we call match factor and watch through rate that measure how well the content is matching against the segment or sub-audience preferences, okay? The contribution margin can measure a number of things. It is very easy to model the contribution margin for transactional video on demand, TVOD in the jargon of the industry, because the contribution margin of watching an incremental time, a particular TVOD movie, is just the price, the final price of a movie minus the acquisition cost, okay? When we are talking about transactional VOD or linear content, etc., there's a number of ways we can model these as a sort of economical, quote unquote, contribution margin. And this is something that we would like to investigate a little further, okay? As for inventory pricing and allocation, okay, we have a way to evaluate or have evaluation for inventory. And it is, we can assume or we can derive theoretically that the best way to fix a price for a curation slot is by making this price basically proportional to the value, the assessed value of promoting or curating that content for that slot, okay? And this even allows us to implement a very simple algorithm for automatic curation. Once we have determined the value of the inventory, the value of the curation slots, it is straightforward to do automatic curation. Not that we are aiming at automatic curation, there's a human touch at that, but the algorithm can be implemented very easily because we are now understanding the economic underpinnings of the TV curation activity itself. Effectiveness can be also measured in very simple terms. The value of placing content in a curation slot is basically the estimated increase as measured by contribution margin, the estimated increase in terms of the incremental number of playbacks we are obtaining for that particular content entry. So the effectiveness is just measuring how well effectively the content performed divided by how we estimated that it should perform based on the fact that we have promoted this particular content entry. There's a number of ways, of techniques, I won't enter into details, about how to measure the baseline playback level of a particular content so as to determine what, due to, let's say, the intrinsic nature of a content and what is due to the fact that the content has been promoted or curated. There's a number of techniques for that, and again, we can discuss this offline or later on during the Q&A, etc. Okay, and at the end of the day, we have distilled everything into a very nice mathematical code model, but there's a secret sauce, and there's where a human intuition enters, aided probably by algorithms and by technology. And this is about estimation of matching. How well does content match for a particular segment, for a particular sub-audience? This can be done via genres at a very high level, or micro genres that are increasingly more and more popular in order to finely categorize content. And there's also a number of techniques and AI-based technologies based on automatic tagging that might help automatically estimate a matching factor for a particular content entry as against the particular audience segment. And there's also the issue of estimating the watch-through rate. How effective will curation be in terms of the percentage of end users who finally click on the curation slot and watch the movie, okay? Again, there's some techniques for measuring the structural components or the baseline components of these WTR figure, and there's also some ways of estimating a priori how well the watch-through rate is going to behave, okay? We are working at Optiva Media in a suite of products called Media Suite. This is a suite of products aiding pay TV operators, OTT players, TV companies in general, manage their content both at the metadata and media levels. And as part of this Media Suite, we are working now, as we talk, in Media Curator, that it is a component for assisting editorial teams in TV curation activities that uses the formal model that I have briefly described. And we are talking to a lot of people, potential customers or players or people just interested in this kind of stuff in order to understand how the model works from a conceptual point of view. And we are working on implementing these ideas into some concrete product that can ultimately assist editorial teams in their very hard job of TV curation. There's a number of further topics to investigate, like how to refine the utility models for what I previously called the contribution margin, because it is not the same. TVOD is very easy to model. Subscription-based content is not easily modeled, and we also want to include in the model the possibility to somehow modulate between let's say concrete monetary valuations of content promotion against not so concrete valuations having to do with general KPIs like engagement or churn reduction, etc. We're also working, and we want to initiate a discussion, an open discussion within the industry on the topic of automated match estimation. This is related, but not exactly the same as a personal recommendation. There are some algorithms and techniques that can be translated or applied, but the problem is slightly different, and some new technologies are called for this particular problem. We also want to somehow increase or enrich the model by including notions of thematic playlists and what I call DJ curation playlists, which are basically playlists generated by some famous guy, okay, let's say. So the first version of a model does not make any difference between any curation slot or another, but we know there's a difference, and we know we want to somehow understand how we can model these, because there's some economic dynamics of their own when we talk about playlists generated by, I don't know, Paris Hilton or whoever, some famous guy, etc. So we want to continue investigating on that topic. And finally, and this is like the most interesting challenge, I would say, in terms of advancing this model, is to somehow include also the view of the editorial team when it comes not to curate content, but to acquire content. So from a formal point of view, what we are doing is swap the supply and demand sides of this market. And we are like now seeing the thing from the standpoint of editorial teams who are like challenged with the job or task of deciding what content to acquire, okay? And combining both TV curation and TV acquisition is a very interesting topic, and would probably yield more refined and more fun to play economic formal models that ultimately help us understand how things are going and how we can automate it or assist it better. So this is a presentation. We are presenting the paper in the hope that we can open a discussion with interested players in the industry in order to understand whether this makes sense, whether this adds value, and whether we want to jointly try and create some shared vocabulary and models for better understanding TV curation from its current, let's say, black art status to a more rigorous stage. And that's basically it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joaquín, for this very, very interesting presentation. It is something I have to say something, a new approach, let's say, for the business impact for content creation. And this is a topic that I hope we will discuss later in the discussion, because it comes up a lot of questions regarding to effectiveness of this type of model. Thank you again. And now we go ahead with our fourth presentation. I would